True Social, tak? Teraz coś ma się zadziać, tylko nie do końca wiadomo co, ale to jest z kolei Trump, więc też nikt nie wie do końca jak to interpretować, czy to wejdzie, czy nie wejdzie. W jakim stopniu wszyscy się przestraszyli, więc cena ropy poszybowała do góry, klasycznie. I przypał, znowu jest przypał. No a jako, że puszka Pandory się, prawda, otworzyła na nowo, nie to żeby kiedyś była zamknięta, ale otworzyła się szerzej jeszcze niż była wcześniej otwarta, no to jakby wiecie, Arabia Saudyjska zaczęła sobie strzelać w Jemen, Jemen zaczął robić swoje rzeczy, ogólnie wszyscy strzelają do wszystkich. Jak już się dzieją rzeczy, prawda, no to można wykorzystać. Jak Arabia Saudyjska ma okazję strzelić w Jemen, no to też głupio nie skorzystać, to bo sobie strzelają w Jemen i tak dalej, i tak dalej. Ogólnie na Bliskim Wschodzie znowu jest całkowite piekło i w sumie wygląda to tak, jakby ten konflikt po prostu nigdy nie miał nawet przerwy, po prostu wracamy całkowicie do tego stanu, który był wcześniej. I to jest ważne, żeby o tym powiedzieć, no bo wydaje nam się, że faktycznie wiecie, ten temat wcześniej normów i tak dalej przycichł, trochę przygasł właśnie przez mundial, mniejsze nasilenie ataków. I wiecie, faktycznie mogłoby się wydawać, że doszliśmy do jakiegoś końca tego, nie? W sensie, że doszliśmy do jakiegoś takiego zawieszenia broni. Jeśli ktoś się nie interesował tym wszystkim bardziej, to mógł odnieść takie wrażenie, że to jakby już się trochę uspokoiło. Ale przeciwnie po to, żeby powiedzieć, że nie, że to tak naprawdę wygląda tak, jak wyglądało i że jest tak samo źle. W sensie jakoś niespecjalnie różni się to od sytuacji wcześniej. Trump wyzywa Iran od tego, że są absurdalnie powaleni w ogóle i że jakby tak możecie, że są chorzy, że oni nie chcą tego pokoju. Prezydencie robi tą blokadę, strzela w Iran. Iran stwierdza, że jakby w sumie to oni mają to wszystko gdzieś i po prostu będą sobie strzelać do tych statków i jakby są gotowi dalej walczyć. Z pogrzebu Kameniego mamy jakby, wiecie, widoki gigantycznej ilości ludzi i okazuje się, że ta wizja, wiecie, że nie wiem, pamiętacie, początku wojny jeszcze, mówiąca o tym, że Irańczycy będą musieli się sami wyzwolić na koniec dnia i tak dalej, że Stany atakują, ale to Irańczycy będą musieli to wszystko zrobić. Wydaje się już być całkowicie nieprawdopodobna w tym momencie. No bo z jednej strony to nie jest tak, że wiecie, ludzie nagle zaczęli kochać ten reżim, który jeszcze nie tak dawno temu, przypominamy, zabijał ludzi na ulicach, tak, prawda, w ramach walki z protestami. Wiecie, moment, w którym Stany Zjednoczone bombardują im wszystko, to też jest moment, w którym jednak ten zewnętrzny reżim wydaje się być też rzeczą, z którą trzeba walczyć, trzeba się jednoczyć przeciwko niemu. NGO-sy mówią, że 77% bombardowań są w ogóle, to jest infrastruktura cywilna i tak dalej, co pewnie nie napawa jakimś takim, wiecie, wielką miłością od Stanów Zjednoczonych ludu Iranu. Stany Zjednoczone wydają się nie mieć żadnego absolutnie pomysłu, jak zakończyć ten konflikt, no bo w sumie co, ostatnio byliśmy najbliżej zakończenia go z tych wszystkich rzeczy i w sumie okazało się, że po pierwsze było to całkowicie nie stała, po drugie nawet w trakcie, kiedy teoretycznie trwało to memorandum, zawieszenie broni, jakkolwiek to nazwać, to w sumie tak wszyscy strzelali do wszystkich. Iran powiedzmy strzelał, Izrael strzelał i Stany strzelały. Trochę pytanie brzmi, jak to wszystko zakończyć. To jest jakby takie największe pytanie w tym wszystkim, bo my rozumiemy, że ludzie mogą być już zmęczeni tym tematem. Problem jest oczywiście taki, że to dalej ceny ropy i tak dalej, więc możemy wrócić do tego problemu, który ciutkę się ustabilizował ostatnio, ale jakby wracamy. Biorąc to wszystko pod uwagę, nie bardzo widać, jak to ma skończyć, w jakikolwiek sposób, no bo Iran sobie walczy o przetrwanie, więc będą walczyć do końca. Stany Zjednoczone ewidentnie nie chcą wchodzić i nie wejdą tam militarnie, tak wiecie, zbrojnie, tak w sensie, wiecie, postawią żołnierzy na ziemi. No nie, jak zostało nie ile, 4 miesiące do midtermów, 3 miesiące do midtermów w Stanach Zjednoczonych, to brzmi jak spójstwo polityczne. To też się raczej przecież nie wydarzy. Z drugiej strony też nie jest tak, że można sobie czekać w nieskończoność, no bo w tym momencie trwa wojna na wyniszczenie. Tylko problem jest taki, że Iran jakby musi wytrzymać niszczenie swojej gospodarki, a Stany wytrzymują niszczenie gospodarki całego świata. Stawka jest wysoka, powiedzmy. Nikt nie wie, jak to nie ma zakończyć, nikt nie widzi pomysłu, jak to zakończyć, co jest trochę niepokojące chyba. Toczy się. Chcieliśmy wam po prostu powiedzieć, że toczy, że wróciło i że rzeczy w ciśnieniu Ormus dzieją się dalej. W sumie z taką samą intensywnością, jak działy się wcześniej. Przejdźmy sobie do tej partii w Polsce, no bo to trochę, wiecie, lżejsze. No bo moi drodzy, sezon przedwyborczy w pełni. Powstaje nowa partia, no to jakby wiecie, zapach nowej partii o poranku sugeruje nam, że wybory już niedługo. Powstała nowa partia, Unia Centrum. Nie Porozumienie Centrum, Unia Centrum. Chociaż partia Unia Centrum wyszła z porozumienia. Wyszła z porozumienia dwóch partii. Właściwie nie z partii, tylko z Unii Europejskich Demokratów, którzy byli partią, i z klubu parlamentarnego Centrum. Te dwie organizacje się, prawda, połączyły, tworzyły teraz partię Unia Centrum. Partia Unia Centrum to jest partia, która tak naprawdę w tym momencie parlamentarnie złożona jest z ludzi, którzy wcześniej byli w Polsce 2050, potem odeszli, prawda, to całą tą imbę znacie, opowiadaliśmy wam ją. Oni odeszli z Polski 2050, no właśnie założyli ten swój klub parlamentarny, a teraz jakby, no złączyli się z czymś, co już jest partią, żeby nie musieć rejestrować swojej partii, po prostu stworzyli z tego partię, już są szybko partią. Taka przyspieszona droga do zostania partią w Polsce. Nie zakładacie swoją, tylko bierzecie jakąś inną i no nie tyle ją przejmujecie, no bo nie twierdzimy, że została przejęta, ale no jakby w jakiś sposób, prawda, połączona, no i to wy macie reprezentację parlamentarną, więc sobie trochę ją przejęliście, ale dobra, zostawmy to. Pewnie dla Unii Demokratów kiedyś, prawda, Unii Europejskich Demokratów to było opłacalne, no bo się zgodzili, tak, więc jakby spoko. Związane do tego, że powstała nowa partia. Szefową oczywiście Henning Kloska, zero zaskoczeń tutaj. No i Henning Kloska, prawda, też komorno, ale Henning Kloska też wyszła na konferencję prasową, no i zaczęli tłumaczyć. No jaka to jest partia? Czym ma być nowa partia, która powstała? Nowa partia będzie gospodarczo taka właśnie wolnościowa, będzie proprzedsiębiorcza, europejska też, tak dalej. No i też będzie zielona jednocześnie. Będzie to partia właśnie zielona, będzie to partia skupiona na środowisku, na kwestiach właśnie klimatycznych i tak dalej, i tak dalej. Zostało to wytłumaczone też przy okazji tłumaczenia kolorów partii, co jest dosyć oryginalnym zagraniem. Że niebieski reprezentuje przedsiębiorców, a zielony środowisko. To jest rzecz. Do tego wszystkiego, no co, mamy proste wrażenie, że jest to partia, która celuje w ten legendarny elektorat w Polsce, czyli ludzi wolnościowych, gospodarczo i progresywnych światopoglądowo, więc jest to klasyk polskich partii politycznych. To taka legendarna partia polityczna Yeti w Polsce. Masa ludzi mówi, że to jest partia, której potrzebuje, to jest teoretycznie partia, która istnieje w każdej partii, trochę już w tym momencie mamy wrażenie, żeby większość partii próbuje się kreować trochę na takie właśnie partie i jednocześnie jakby jest takie wrażenie, że nikt tą partią nie jest, ale też, że tej partii chyba się w Polsce nie da stworzyć. Jest ciekawy konstrukt, w sensie, często właśnie rozmawiamy sobie między prowadzącymi, prawda, między tutaj właścicielami kanału Warp, o tym właśnie, że ta partia, właśnie taka legendarna partia wolnorynkowa i progresywna światopoglądowo, to jest ta rzecz, która zawsze się przewija w dyskusjach, jakby wszyscy twierdzą, że są tą partią, wszyscy twierdzą, żeby głosowali na tą partię, a jakoś tak to nigdy nie działa. Niesamowita sprawa w Polsce. Zostawmy to w każdym razie, zostawmy to. Przejdziemy do tego, że jest to prawda partia, która tutaj na takich oryginalnych zasadach powstaje, właśnie zgarnia tych ludzi z centrum, czyli kiedyś z Polski 2050, przynajmniej tą część, która odeszła, chce wygrać wybory. Taki jest cel, będą chcieli wygrać wybory, będą chcieli pójść do wyborów, będą tworzyć rzeczy. No i ta partia jest ciekawą rzeczą. Drugą ciekawą rzeczą, która powstaje do tego wszystkiego, jest Ryszard Petru. Znaczy, Ryszard Petru już istnieje. Ryszard Petru tworzy. Coś tworzy. Pytanie, co tworzy? I to nie jest tak proste, jak mogłoby wam się wydawać, żeby odpowiedzieć na to pytanie. Ryszard Petru wyszedł i powiedział, że on nie wchodzi do tej partii. Okej. Zakładasz swoją partię. No i na to Ryszard Petru stwierdził, że tak, jakby. Albo nie. Bo Ryszard Petru chce założyć Konfederację Light. Konfederacja Light ma być ugrupowaniem, ale niekoniecznie partią, która będzie szersza. Będzie taki szeroki Ryszard Petru. Szeroki Ryszard Petru, czy szerokie ugrupowanie Ryszarda Petru ma za zadanie skupić ludzi z zewnątrz polityki, jakichś ekspertów i tak dalej, którzy chcą się skupić na hardym, mocnym, wyrazistym programie wolnościowym, jeśli chodzi o gospodarkę. W sumie to głównie to, jakby tu chyba nie ma za bardzo nic więcej. Tu zaczynają się problemy. On chce z tego stworzyć ugrupowanie w jakiś sposób powiązane chyba z Unią Centrum, szczególnie, że ma w ogóle w Unii Centrum brać udział w pisaniu programu, może nie jest tej partii, ciekawe. Ale jednocześnie on zakłada, że te rozmowy mogą być ciężkie, no bo Henning Kloska to za bardzo ekologicznie, on lubi ekologię, on lubi drzewa, on lubi rzeki, czyste rzeki, to sobie parafraza, ale padło to. On lubi czyste rzeki, on lubi lasy, tam drzewa, ale no, że ona za bardzo jest taka ekologiczna, on by się chciał skupić na tej gospodarczej części, więc on nie wie do końca, czy oni się dogadają, więc to też nie wie, czy będzie tworzył swoją partię, czy właśnie ten ruch, który będzie tutaj jakby przyległy z tym wszystkim, ale że on chce w ogóle iść osobno do wyborów, a też jednocześnie nie wie, czy pójdzie z centrum, więc jak nie pójdzie z nimi, to chyba musiałby samemu iść, no bo co innego, bo powiedział sobie, że chce być w koalicji rządzącej, ale nie pójdzie z Platformą, Polska 2050, no bo Tołczyńska najczęściej jest zbyt socjalistyczna, nie pójdzie z Lewicą, no bo z oczywistych powodów, no więc w sumie mało kto mu zostaje poza PSL-em, co by, wiecie, też odpowiadało na pytanie, jak PSL potencjalnie może wejść do Sejmu, zawsze warto o tym pamiętać. Poza tym to tak się wydaje, że w sumie to albo pójdzie z tą Unią, albo nie pójdzie z nimi, więc to musiałby założyć swoją partię, więc chyba zakłada swoją partię, a jednocześnie będzie pracował nad programem Unii Centrum. To jest skomplikowane wszystko, to jest naprawdę skomplikowane, długo nam zajęło tak rozszyfrowanie tego i też nie mamy poczucia, żebyśmy zrobili to w pełni. W każdym razie powstaje nowa partia w Polsce, a Ryszard Petru w niej nie jest, ale trochę jest. Być może zrobi z niej coś innego. Być może Ryszard Petru po prostu robi skrzydło. Ryszard Petru robi skrzydło Unii Centrum. To jest odważną decyzją robić skrzydło partii, która ma mniej niż procent poparcia. To jest na mocne zagranie, ale okej. To jest jakiś pomysł, jakaś struktura. I jeśli chodzi o szanse nowej partii w Polsce, bo to też powinniśmy nas zastanowić. Wydaje mi się, że są zerowe, tak szczerze. Biorąc pod uwagę poparcie, które mają, to wydaje się, że jest bliskie zeru. Jeśli chodzi o to, że jest to partia, która powstała w Polsce 2050, która ma też poparcie, to też jest ciężko. Rozpad Polski i Unii Centrum, czy wtedy jeszcze tego klubu Centrum się zdarzył już jakiś czas temu, w sumie to gdzieś już parę miesięcy temu i to chyba wszyscy zapomnieli, że w ogóle Centrum istnieje, teraz Unia Centrum istnieje, więc oni wychodzą w wakacje, kiedy nic się w policji nie dzieje i też nikogo bo ludzie są zajęci grillowaniem się nad rzeką, czystą rzeką, Ryszard Petru lubi to. Wiecie, oni teraz ogłaszają nową partię, znaczy wiadomo, programową konwencję chcą robić we wrześniu, wtedy już będą patrzeć na nich, ale still robią ją teraz, prawda? Mamy takie poczucie, że nie do końca wiemy, czy ta partia ma szansę istnieć do końca, to jest nasza wątpliwość. No być może oczywiście, nie? W sensie, wiecie, my też możemy się mylić, my też możemy nie dostrzegać jakiegoś geniuszu taktycznego, my też może nie dostrzegamy jakiegoś, wiecie, trendu albo jakiejś takiej potrzeby Polaków do takiej partii, ale ogólnie mam wrażenie, że tych partii robi się trochę dużo w Polsce w tym momencie, które potencjalnie można głosować. Po samej stronie koalicyjnej, jak zwrócicie uwagę, to zaczyna się ich robić bardzo dużo, nie? W sensie zaczyna się robić bardzo dużo samych partii koalicyjnych, a co dopiero jeszcze, prawda, partie opozycyjne istnieją, nie? To może być ciekawa kwestia. My nie wykluczamy, że oni na koniec i tak pójdą z Platformą Obywatelską do wyborów. Nie wykluczamy tego. To wie, prawda, może będziemy bardzo zaskoczeni, może oni właśnie stworzą swoją własną partię, zrobią 10% i staną się, wiecie, ważną siłą polityczną, siłą protestu, która bardzo będzie różniła się od Polski 2050, bo w przeciwieństwie do Polski 2050, która właśnie była taka, przedstawiała się jakoś taka, wiecie, oczywiście wolnorynkowa i bardzo ekologiczna, to ta będzie wolnorynkowa i ekologiczna. Także nowa partia w Polsce. Ważne, że istnieje. Jak chcecie wiedzieć więcej ważnych rzeczy o polskiej i zagranicznej polityce, sami widzicie w jednym filmie, zostawcie lajka, zostawcie suba, nam będzie bardzo miło, będziemy nasz filmy. Nasz film, którego pytamy, nasz Instagram, serdecznie w pierwszym patronie. Zachęcamy serdecznie patrona, ta strona jest dla was. Cześć!
To jest trochę syfu. Trzeba zarobić tak, żeby syfu nie było. Tak powiedział szef prosektory warszawskiego szpitala południowego do lekarza wykonującego sekcję zwłok. Okej, no dobra, odpowiedział lekarz. Chodzi o sprawę pacjenta, który wiele godzin po śmierci został znaleziony w łazience. Sprawę nagłośnił dr Emil Jędrzejewski, były ordynator chirurgii warszawskiego szpitala południowego. Prokuratura kilkanaście dni temu powiedziała, że sprawdzała, czy w prosektorium warszawskiego szpitala południowego dokonywano nagrań. Uznała, że nie. Redakcja 0.pl i kanał 0 mają kilkadziesiąt godzin nagrań z prosektorium warszawskiego szpitala.
Nowość All Nutrition. Veda Vitamin Water. Funkcja w każdej kropli. Dostępny w sklepie SFD.
Kadra nie gra? Karta gra. Świętuj mundial z najszybszym cashbackiem.
Triverna.pl. Najlepsze hotele, najlepsze ceny, zero ściemy. Rezerwuj taniej z kodem 0.
Zabierz magazyn Zero na wakacje. 400 stron świetnych tekstów. Zamów na magazyn.zero.pl.
Dziś w 0.pl wspólnie z Jakubem Styczyńskim prezentujemy Wam historię pacjenta, który zmarł w łazience warszawskiego szpitala południowego. Historię o tyle nietypową, że pacjent wyszedł ze swojego łóżka do łazienki i wiele godzin później został w niej znaleziony. O tej historii opowiadał Emil Jędrzejewski podczas wywiadu z Krzysztofem Stanowskim w kanale 0.
Znaczy ja myślę, że powinien być każdy przypadek śmierci na SOR-ze przeanalizowany. Ja już pomijam sytuację pacjenta, który jest zapisany w stan chorych SOR-u i wychodzi do łazienki i po 3-4 godzinach ktoś sobie przypomina o tym, że gdzie jest ten pacjent i znajduje tego pacjenta martwego.
Nam udało się dotrzeć do zapisu audio z sekcji zwłok tego pacjenta. I co z tego zapisu wynika? Wynika przede wszystkim to, że wszyscy w szpitalu wiedzą, że jest to syf. I ludzie w szpitalu wiedzieli, że jest to syf, który trzeba posprzątać. Zaraz Wam zaprezentujemy nagrania, ale kilka słów.
5th, 1958, two pieces of Cold War hardware were flying over the sleepy marshlands of Savannah, Georgia. One was a B-47 bomber loaded with a 7,600-pound thermonuclear bomb, the Mark 15 with the potential yield of several megatons. The other was an F-86 fighter jet on a training mission. In the darkness and rain, the two aircraft collided. The bomber's pilot, Colonel Howard Richardson, felt the shock as the left wing of the fighter ripped through his plane. The fighter pilot ejected safely. A miracle. The bomber continued flying, but one of its wings was leaking fuel and its bomb bay doors had been damaged. If the bomb broke free on landing, it could have detonated its high explosives inside the fuselage. Richardson faced an impossible choice. Try landing with a 3.8 megaton weapon hanging precariously under his damaged aircraft, or jettison it and hope for the best. He chose the latter, and somewhere over Wassaw Sound near Tybee Island, he released the Mark 15. The bomb plunged into the dark water and vanished. In the hours that followed, U.S. Air Force crews scoured the beaches and inlets around Tybee Island. I don't think I have to explain to you how dangerous it is to let a nuclear bomb set around inside of the continental United States. Divers combed the seafloor. Sonar pings mapped the mud. The search lasted weeks and cost millions of dollars, and in the end, it failed. The government claimed the weapon lacked its plutonium core and could not produce a nuclear detonation. Decades later, congressional testimony suggested that the bomb might have been fully assembled. and the original claims that it didn't have its plutonium were simply to make the public feel better. In 2001, a hydrographic survey found an anomaly buried beneath 5 to 15 feet of silt, an object roughly the size of a Mark 15. The U.S. Air Force politely asked fishermen to avoid dragging their nets over the spot. As the years went on, locals continued to swim in the ocean and sunbathe at the beach. And to this day, Savannah's water hides a nuclear bomb. Tybee bomb is not the prologue from a Mission Impossible film. It's one of dozens of accidents the U.S. military refers to as broken arrows. A broken arrow is a, quote, unexpected event involving nuclear weapons that result in the accidental launching, firing, detonating, theft, or loss of the weapon. Oscar Morgenstern once warned that with thousands of nuclear weapons in existence, quote, the danger of a nuclear accident in the world is unquestionably increasing. That assessment appears to be the right one, because since 1950, the United States has acknowledged 32 broken arrow incidents, and 6 of those are still missing. I mean, what do you even do with that information? we have lost a total of 32 nukes, and 6 of them are still out there somewhere. Good luck, I guess. Well, don't worry, because today we're following the yellow radiation sign down a path lined with Cold War paranoia and some truly head-scratching decisions. We'll explore how the frantic pace of nuclear deterrence created a culture in which bombers flew 24 hours a day, armed with weapons designed to incinerate cities, and how in that environment, human error, mechanical failure, and sheer bad luck produced moments that make the Tybee bomb look lame in comparison. This is a story about the tension between a civilization's desire for security and the enormous risks it was willing to accept to achieve it, even if one of those risks was having a nuclear device go missing within your own border. Or I guess I should say nuclear devices, because as mentioned, there were a lot. So hello everybody, today we're talking about the United States' many broken arrows, and its 32 missing nuclear bombs, again, 6 of which are still somewhere. Every now and then I'll come across a topic that I'll hear about and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's probably overstated or like, you know, exaggerated for the sake of interest or whatever. But then you look into it and you're like, oh no, it is really that bad. Great. Well, today is certainly one of those topics. So if you want to become worried about something else, then you're in the right place. And if all that sounds interesting to you, then stick around after the ad as we talk about the many broken arrow failures. But when thinking about nukes, you're probably thinking about war. And if you're thinking about war, then you're probably thinking about today's sponsor, War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made and is available now for free on PC, consoles, and mobile devices. Take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships of 10 major nations, ranging from biplanes and armored cars of the 1920s to the fighter jets and main battlefields of today. War Thunder has one of the most sophisticated damage vehicle models in gaming. Every vehicle is intricately modeled down to its individual components, like engines, fuel tanks, weapons, and crew, all susceptible to damage or disabling from enemy fire. And different types of armor, shells, and missiles behave like their real-world counterparts. If your vehicle or an enemy is destroyed, War Thunder shows you exactly what happens. In X-ray view, you'll see precisely how the shell penetrated, which components were affected, and what ultimately led to the destruction of the vehicle. I admire the authenticity and dedication to depicting every weapon on the battlefield. So many games skimp over the details, and I'm thankful that War Thunder does it. Immerse yourself in the intense combat of War Thunder, where incredibly detailed vehicles, realistic graphics, and authentic sound effects place you right at the helm of the most powerful war machines of our time. Join a worldwide community of over 95 million players in epic PvP battles today and delve into the breathtaking experience that is War Thunder. With an unmatched wealth of high-quality content to discover, there's simply no game better suited for fans of military history. And best of all, you can now play War Thunder for free on PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and mobile devices. Just be sure to use my links in the description and pinned comment to sign up. If you make a new account or haven't played in 6 months, you'll also receive a massive bonus pack with lots of goodies for PC and console to give you a head start in the game. Besides 3 premium vehicles, you'll also receive a 50% experience and income booster, 2 advanced vehicles for rent, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account time, among other things. This offer is only available for a limited time, so be sure to get in on it now. Thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring the channel. Their link will be in the description, and we are now back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. Now, to understand how bombs end up in swamps and plowed into tobacco fields, we should first talk about the operating culture of the early Cold War. From the late 1940s through the 1960s, the United States built a nuclear deterrent based on speed, readiness, and dispersal. Strategic Air Command, or SAC, trained bomber crews to penetrate enemy defenses, survive interceptions, and deliver nuclear weapons under wartime conditions. This meant that B-47s and B-52s took off at odd hours, flew low-level routes over deserts and oceans, and practiced in darkness and storms. Nuclear weapons were integrated into live military operations. Bomber crews set alert at the end of runways with hydrogen bombs in their bays. Fighters drilled with nuclear air-to-air rockets. Transport aircraft ferried warheads around the world. At one point, SAC kept B-52s, quote, armed with nuclear warheads, flying 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If this sounds like a horrible idea, then you're not alone. Even some generals were nervous of these conditions. Jet aircraft of the era were marvels of engineering and harbingers of danger. The B-47 represented a huge leap in speed and range over World War II bombers, but it was a chore to fly. Pilots wrestled with thin wings and complex fuel systems, the aircraft had to be precisely balanced, and it required mid-air refueling, often at night. Add live nuclear weapons to that mix, and the consequences of a mistake could be catastrophic. Yet safety procedures, while extensive, existed within a culture that prized readiness above all else. Crews removed locking pins from bomb release mechanisms during takeoff and landing so they could jettison a weapon in an emergency. And those pins occasionally came out at the worst possible moment. If you're like me, you're probably hearing all this and thinking, why not just do these practice runs without an actual nuclear bomb? You could put like a fake plastic one in there. It can even be really heavy if you want it to be, just, don't put the nuke inside the plane. Well, practice missions like that were ran. But at a certain point, the United States is developing a lot of bombs, and they want to have them on the ready. I mean, with moments throughout the Cold War like the Cuban Missile Crisis, the United States thought that they would have to respond to a nuclear event within an hour. So after pilots and crews underwent a lot of training, they began to carry the live munition, with the idea being any of these practice runs could become a real run in a matter of minutes if need be. It's still kind of absurd and a huge liability, hence, the topic of the video today, but it's the same thought process as if you're gonna have soldiers stand at guard with guns, the guns might as well be loaded. Just, rather than a lead bullet, now it's a weapon that can destroy an entire city. Potato, tomato. But to make sure we're all on the same page, and for the 5 of you who watched this channel and didn't watch Oppenheimer, what is in the bomb itself? A crucial distinction in any discussion of nuclear weapons is between the high explosives that surround the nuclear core and the nuclear core itself. A bomb's high explosives can detonate even if the nuclear core is absent. They're designed to compress the core to start a chain reaction, but if the core isn't there, then the explosion is conventional. In other words, your standard explosion with a charge that blows up, as opposed to the point of a primed nuclear weapon where the explosion is simply there to make the nuclear core react and, go nuclear. Many broken arrow incidents involve weapons without their cores, which can also be referred to as capsules. In these cases, the crash scattered high explosive fragments and sometimes bits of depleted uranium, but no nuclear explosion was possible. In other instances, the core was present but not inserted into the bomb, reducing but not eliminating the risk of nuclear yield. This distinction is why, despite 32 broken arrows, none have resulted in an unintended nuclear detonation. At least, not yet. Fingers crossed that those fishermen don't, drag their nets too far across the bottom of the river. It's also why the Type bomb remains contentious. The official narrative says the Mark 15 lacked its plutonium pit, but a 1966 congressional testimony released in 1994 suggested otherwise, noting that the Type bomb, quote, was indeed a complete, fully functional bomb with a plutonium pit. If that's true, a bomb with a yield of 3.8 megatons, about 190 times more powerful than the Fat Man dropped on Nagasaki, is still sitting under Georgia's mud. So, good luck, I guess. The 32 acknowledged broken arrow incidents include bombs jettisoned from burning aircraft, weapons blown apart by conventional explosives, and lost warheads sitting at the bottom of oceans. 6 of these weapons have never been recovered. From Alaska to the Mediterranean Sea, from rural South Carolina to the Azores, the accidents span the globe. Each has its own flavor of absurdity and bureaucratic denial, of course. But it all starts with the first broken arrow. The Cold War hadn't even reached its 10th birthday when, on February 13, 1950, a B-36 bomber departed Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska on a simulated combat mission to Carswell AFB in Texas. 6 hours into the flight, the aircraft developed serious mechanical difficulties and lost 3 of its 6 engines. Icing conditions quickly made an already bad emergency worse, and the crew couldn't maintain altitude. With mountains looming, the crew did what their procedures told them to do. They headed out over the Pacific and dropped their weapon from 8,000 feet. Witnesses reported a bright flash and a shock wave. The bomb's high explosives detonated on impact. The plutonium core was not installed, thank God, so the only explosion that went off was the explosives that were intended to set off a plutonium core had it been in there. The B-36 then limped towards Canada. Eventually, the crew bailed out and the aircraft crashed on Vancouver Island as the weapon sank somewhere into the dark ocean waters. This was the first time the United States had jettisoned a nuclear bomb, and unfortunately, it wasn't the last. If dropping a bomb in the ocean wasn't enough, later, on April 11, 1950, a B-29 crashed into a mountain near Manzano Base in New Mexico, minutes after takeoff. The crash destroyed the bomb's casing and scattered high explosives, but because the nuclear capsule was not inserted, there was no risk of a nuclear yield. A few months later, a B-50 on a training mission plowed into the ground near Lebanon, Ohio, killing 16 crew members. The high explosives detonated, but again, no nuclear material was aboard. 7 years later, a B-36 was ferrying a nuclear weapon from Texas to Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. As it approached the base at about 1,700 feet, the bomb simply fell out of the bomb bay, taking the doors with it. Which, I'm not a plane expert, obviously wasn't in the Air Force, and I understand these bombs are designed to be released quickly if need be, but I feel like maybe they're designed to release a little too quickly if they can just fall out sometimes and take, the doors underneath the aircraft with them. Just a thought. The weapon's parachutes deployed, but the altitude was too low, and the bomb hit the ground south of the airfield, detonating its high explosives. The resulting crater was 25 feet wide and 12 feet deep, with debris scattered nearly a mile away. Fortunately, the nuclear core was not inserted, but why did the bomb drop? Well, standard procedure at the time required removing the locking pin so the crew could jettison the weapon quickly if needed. The crew was preparing to land, the pin was out, and well, it's a big, heavy bomb, so gravity did the rest. Remember, kids, if your job ever involves carrying a thermonuclear weapon in an aircraft for some reason, maybe secure them with more than a single pin. About a month after the Tybee bomb, which we talked about at the beginning of the video, another B-47 accidentally jettisoned a nuclear weapon, this time near Florence, South Carolina. March 11, 1958, the bomber had just leveled off at 15,000 feet when the navigator reached to secure the bomb's harness. Somehow, he triggered the emergency release instead. The opposite of what he was supposed to be doing. And again, these crews were overworked, you're tired, it's a high-stress job, I get all that. But because of that, I feel like the button or the place to put the pin or whatever to secure the bomb should probably be pretty distinct from the button that sends the bomb out, over the United States. Maybe you have like 2 buttons you have to push to launch it, You don't want it to be you don't want it to be that easy to drop it in. The Mark 6 bomb fell through the bomb bay doors and plummeted towards the countryside, where it landed in the backyard of the Gregg family and exploded, blasting a crater 35 feet wide. The high explosives it's not, okay, I don't mean to laugh, because people got injured, it's not funny. It's not funny that happened, but it is a little funny to imagine, what was the day like before? Were they eating breakfast? Were they just hanging out, talking about work that day? And then the United States Air Force drops a nuke in their backyard. Like, they didn't do anything. There's no way you can prepare for that eventuality. No one is prepared for the Air Force just dropping a nuke in your backyard. The explosives demolished a farmhouse and injured several people. Fortunately, the bomb's nuclear capsule was not on board. The Gregg family received about $55,000 in compensation, which is roughly $600,000 today. I would find the most expensive attorney in the world and I would get millions. The U.S. dropped a nuke in my backyard? You're paying for my great-grandkids' college. The event became known as the Mars Bluff Incident. The Gregg family would eventually appear on the television show I've Got a Secret in 1972 and stump the panel trying to guess what their secret was. And I'm pretty sure no one would have believed them had they not had the checks from the government to prove it. If you really want your stomach to drop, then consider the events of January 24th, 1961. A B-52 Stratofortress was, oh man, what a cool name for a plane, a Stratofortress, was flying over North Carolina when it developed a fuel leak in the right wing. The leak caused a structural failure and the bomber broke apart mid-air. The aircraft was carrying 2 Mark 39 hydrogen bombs, each with a yield of 3.8 megatons. Not even one nuclear bomb, 2 hydrogen bombs? As the plane disintegrated, the bombs fell free. One slammed into a muddy field at over 700 miles per hour and buried itself more than 180 feet deep. The second deployed its parachute and executed its disarming sequence exactly as designed. What followed was the failure of several safeguards designed to prevent a catastrophe. All of the bomb's internal systems were still armed, and this bomb was about to blow up in North Carolina. But by the miracle of engineering and probably the conventional miracle of, God, a single low voltage switch prevented the bomb from detonating. The supervisor of nuclear weapons safety at Sandia National Laboratories later remarked that if not for that one switch, the United States would have suffered a, quote, major catastrophe in spades. This is the kind of horror that really gets under your skin. The bombs that could have gone off but didn't. Just imagine how different life could be right now had one of these broken arrow incidents gone differently. Lucky for us, the Mark 39 had 6 interlocking safety devices. 4 had failed, 1 was damaged when the bomb hit the ground, but it was the last one of the day. Recovery teams dug up as much of the weapon as they could, but part of the secondary, this part containing uranium and thermonuclear fuel, remains under the field to this day. The Air Force bought and fenced the land. North Carolina residents occasionally joke about having a built-in nightlight. On the bright side, you could argue that the bomb worked flawlessly. It fell, armed itself, and would have exploded over its target had it not been for that one little safety switch. So, all according to plan, right? Not all broken arrow incidents involve strategic bombers. In December of 1965, the aircraft carrier USS Ticonderoga was conducting a nuclear weapons loading exercise near Okinawa. An A-4E Skyhawk jet was being moved from the hangar to the flight deck when it rolled off an elevator and into the ocean. On board the jet was 1 megaton B-43 nuclear bomb. The aircraft, pilot, and weapon sank to the bottom of the Philippine Sea, an incident which remained classified for decades. So a pilot dies, an aircraft is lost, and a nuclear weapon is now at the bottom of the sea because someone forgot to lock the brakes on the jet, I guess. When it came to light in 1989, it caused an international uproar because US policy supposedly prohibited nuclear weapons from Japanese territory. Japan promptly insisted that the US never bring nukes into its ports again. And that bomb is still down there, waiting. It's just some potential nuclear components surrounded by a high explosive that would set them off at the bottom of the ocean. I'm sure that will never go wrong, ever. The most famous broken arrow may be the one that took place on January 17, 1966, near the fishing village of Palomares in Spain. A B-52 was refueling from a KC-135 tanker at 31,000 feet when the 2 aircraft collided. The tanker exploded. The B-52 broke apart and scattered its 4 B-28 hydrogen bombs. That's right, 4. 7 of the 11 crew members on the 2 planes died. Villagers watched in horror and fascination as flaming debris rained down on their tomato fields like hell spewing from the heavens. Bomb 1 landed in a dry riverbed. Its parachute did not deploy, and the bomb's high explosives detonated on impact. scattering plutonium into Bomb 2. Bomb 2 landed nearby and also exploded, contaminating hundreds of acres. Bomb 3's parachute worked, and it landed intact in the countryside and was recovered quickly, while Bomb 4 drifted out to sea. Locals quickly dubbed it La Bomba. For weeks, the U.S. Navy combed the Mediterranean with submarines and deep-sea trawlers. Spanish fishermen joined the search, motivated by reward money and by, not wanting a hydrogen bomb in their backyard. The search zone was roughly the size of Rhode Island. On April 7th, about 8 days after the accident, Navy divers located the bomb at a depth of 2,550 feet and halted up. The explosions at Palomares did not produce nuclear yields, but the conventional detonation spread plutonium dust across about 558 acres of farmland. U.S. and Spanish crews scraped away 1,400 tons of contaminated soil and shipped it to a nuclear waste site in South Carolina. At one point, U.S. Ambassador Angier Biddle-Duke and Spain's tourism minister staged a swim off the beach to prove it was safe. Which, spoiler alert, plutonium doesn't dissolve in seawater. So today, Palomares remains one of the most heavily studied radiological sites in Europe. In 2015, nearly 50 years later, the US and Spain signed a memorandum to remove the remaining contamination. Sometimes, when you break an arrow, it takes half a century to clean the splinters. On January 21st, 1968, another B-52 was flying a Chrome Dome mission, one of those 24-hour airborne alerts meant to keep nuclear bombers constantly in the air. This one was circling near Thule Air Base in Greenland, watching for Soviet missiles. Inside, a seat cushion in the navigator's compartment caught fire. The fire grew and filled the cockpit with smoke. The crew attempted an emergency landing but were forced to bail out. The plane crashed onto the sea ice of North Star Bay, breaking apart and burning for hours. The aircraft carried 4 hydrogen bombs. The fire detonated their high explosives, scattering radioactive debris over the ice and into the bay. The Thule cleanup was an engineering nightmare. Workers wearing protective gear scraped up 237,000 cubic feet of contaminated ice, snow, and debris and shipped it to the United States for disposal. They built a temporary camp on the ice, complete with a bar nicknamed the Pole Inn, where off-duty soldiers drank beer while watching the Northern Lights. The absurdity of all that needs to be taken into account. You are cleaning up another country's nuclear disaster on the ice as you drink at a makeshift bar under the Northern Lights. Life can be so strange sometimes. Meanwhile, Danish politicians demanded accountability because, similar to the incident near Japan, Denmark had banned nuclear weapons from its territory. And before you correct me in the comments, Greenland was a Danish territory at the time. The U.S. had quietly stationed nuclear-armed bombers there anyway. The Thule crash forced Washington to end Chrome flights. So, if you ever watched Dr. Strangelove and thought to yourself, surely nothing like that ever happened, well, reality, as it seems from the rest of this video, is alarmingly close to fiction sometimes. Not all missing nuclear weapons are bombs. Some are torpedoes. On May 22nd, 1968, the nuclear-attacked submarine USS Scorpion failed to return from a patrol in the Atlantic. The Navy searched for months. In October, the wreck was found on the sea floor 400 miles southwest of Azores. All 99 crew members, sadly, were dead, and the Scorpion had been carrying 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes. Amongst the worst possible deaths that could happen to you ever, dying in a submarine has to be up there. The official investigation concluded that a mechanical failure likely caused an internal torpedo explosion. But some sailors speculated that the submarine had been torpedoed by a Soviet vessel. Declassified SOSUS, or Sound Surveillance System recordings, captured a loud underwater explosion just before contact with the Scorpion was lost. Whatever happened, 2 nuclear weapons sank with the boat, and the Navy continues to monitor the wreck for leakage. So if you're ever considering swimming in that area, don't. By the 1970s, the pace of broken arrows slowed, thankfully, but they didn't stop. In 1979, a Titan II missile at a silo near Rock, Kansas collapsed after a fire, causing the missile to fall to the bottom of the silo. Thankfully, in that case, the nuclear warhead was recovered intact. To give you an idea of how fragile these things can be, less than a year later, in September of 1980 at Damascus, Arkansas, a maintenance technician dropped a socket from a ratchet wrench. The socket punctured the fuel tank of another Titan II missile, causing a volatile fuel leak. That's right, someone just dropped a socket, and somehow that can puncture the side of a nuclear weapon. Hours later, a spark ignited the fuel. The missile exploded with the force of several kilotons. The 740-ton silo door was thrown into the air. The nuclear warhead landed in a ditch about 100 feet away. The safety mechanisms worked, well, relative safety mechanisms worked, and no radioactive material was released. 1 airman died and 21 were injured. The Damascus incident later became the subject of the book and film Command and Control, because it illustrated that even highly engineered systems can be undone by something as small as a drop socket. So, sleep soundly tonight thinking about that all it takes is one maintenance guy to drop a wrench for, a nuclear bomb to go off. The last widely publicized nuclear mishap in the United States occurred on August 29, 2007. Personnel at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota loaded 6 AGM-129 cruise missiles onto a B-52, thinking the weapons were unarmed training rounds, when in fact, 6 of the missiles contained W-80 nuclear warheads. Which I understand, you don't want to make public knowledge where nukes are at any given minute for security. I get that. But I feel like people that are carrying them should probably know the severity of what they've got. The bomber flew to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, where the nuclear-armed missile sat unguarded on the tarmac for 36 hours, because again, everyone else thought that they weren't nukes. No one noticed until a maintenance crew checked the serial numbers. An investigation blamed complacency and a breakdown in procedural discipline, and heads obviously rolled. Even in the 21st century, with all our technology, the most dangerous point of failure is still sometimes a disinterested human with a clipboard. Nuclear weapons are complex machines designed to explode only under very specific conditions. Modern nuclear weapons require precise timing, correct arming codes, and the right environmental cues, such as barometric pressure changes, to detonate. Early weapons relied on removable nuclear cores that could be inserted only after takeoff. Safety engineers implemented multiple redundant locks, safing rods, and environmental sensors to ensure that accidents could not produce a nuclear yield. After the Palomares and Thule incidents, designers introduced unique signal codes so that no single electrical pulse could arm a weapon, which again, it's the kind of thing I don't think you have to have multiple nuke incidents to realize, but whatever. They also developed insensitive high explosives that are less likely to detonate from shock or fire. The result is that in every Broken Arrow incident, the high explosives detonated without triggering the nuclear core. That said, safety systems don't always work as intended. Technology can lower the probability of disaster, but it cannot reduce it to zero. As mentioned, many broken arrows occurred due to human factors. Fatigue, miscommunication, complacency, or pressure to meet training requirements. In the early Cold War, the Strategic Air Command's emphasis on readiness led to routine flights with live weapons. The culture of secrecy also exacerbated errors. Many of these incidents were classified, meaning pilots and maintenance crews often couldn't discuss accidents with others, even those who might learn from them. Lessons were sometimes slow to propagate. You can't repeat history if nobody knows the history. After Palomares, the Air Force improved weapon safeties. After Thule, they ended continuous airborne alerts. But there was no comprehensive public accounting. It wasn't until the 1990s, when researchers filed requests using the Freedom of Information Act and Air Force declassified summaries, that the public learned just how many times we almost detonated or lost bombs that could have leveled an innocent town or destroyed water supplies. Thankfully for all of us, the legacy of broken arrows isn't all bleak. Each incident prompted technological reforms. After early crashes, the Air Force improved bomb release mechanisms and introduced secure locking pins. Which again, I think I would have thought of that before incidents, but I'm just a YouTuber. Who knows? The Goldsboro near miss led to the adoption of permissive action links, or PALs, coded switches that require correct codes to arm a weapon. After Palomares and Thule, weapons designers moved away from highly sensitive high explosives and added unique signals to ensure that stray electrical currents could not arm a bomb. The Damascus incident spurred upgrades to missile silo maintenance protocols and the eventual retirement of the Titan II missiles. Because, probably a bad idea if these things can go off, because again, someone dropped a wrench. Organizational culture evolved as well. SAC's airborne alert missions ended in 1968 after the Thule crash. Bombers were moved to ground alert, reducing the number of flights with live weapons. Maintenance practices improved. The military established the Defense Nuclear Agency and later the Defense Threat Reduction Agency to oversee safety. Nuclear safety inspections, no-notice evaluations of units that handled nuclear weapons, became more stringent. The 2007 Minot-Barksdale incident resulted in a temporary stand-down and the dismissal of several senior officers. Airmen who work around nuclear weapons now undergo rigorous training and psychological screening. The result is that the number of broken arrows has decreased dramatically since the 1980s. It was genuine, the incidents that we know about. Yet, complacency lurks. Decades after the Cold War, it's still possible to load nuclear weapons onto a bomber without anyone noticing. In 2013, reports resurfaced that the Air Force had failed a nuclear safety inspection because of low morale and disciplinary issues. For one, it's nice that they're looking for things that specific. It keeps the safety protocols higher. But also, you're telling me that there were nukes given to groups that had, quote, disciplinary issues? As long as nuclear weapons exist, the possibility of a broken arrow never disappears. And yet still, the physical remnants of some of these accidents remain part of our landscape. A Mark 15 sits under Georgia's coastal mud. A plutonium-contaminated field in North Carolina is fenced off by the US government. Spanish tomato farms at Palomares are still periodically tested for plutonium. Thule's icy bay contains traces of American weapons. The wreck of the Scorpion slowly corrodes on the sea floor, and the human impact should not be forgotten. Airmen died in crashes and cleanups. Families lost homes and livelihoods. Villages were exposed to radiation. And there's the psychological toll. The knowledge that your backyard or coastline could be hiding a bomb powerful enough to destroy a city. If all these stories make you want to build a bunker, then take solace in this. Despite the mishaps, none of the broken arrow incidents resulted in an unintended nuclear detonation. That is not an accident. Weapons designers built layers of safety, and in every case, those layers helped or mitigated the damage. Nuclear weapons are more robust than pop culture suggests. They do not explode like firecrackers and drop. Some accidents came carefully, like the first girl's long switch, Mars scattered plutonium, or the master's warhead thrown from its silo, but they did not cross the final threshold. However, we should resist the temptation to declare the system full. As the historian Mary Schlosser argues, the safety record is, quote, mixed. To say it never happened, therefore it never will, is to misunderstand probability. Each near miss is evidence that our margin for error is not infinite. Think of aviation. The airline industry has a remarkable safety record, but that doesn't mean planes never crash. When they do, investigators identify the cause and move to fixes, which the writer for this script, Logan, put,
This is a wonderful thing to think and write about while I'm about to do a cross-country flight tomorrow morning.
well, guess what, Logan? I haven't heard that you're dead, so looks like you were fine. Grow up. Nuclear weapon accidents happen, but with higher stakes. Another analogy is chemical plants. They often operate for decades without incident, until a combination of equipment failure and human error produces a disaster like Chernobyl. When these disasters happen, they reshape entire regions and sometimes even the world. Nuclear weapons are designed to create unimaginable damage, where even one mistake can devastate a region. Safety culture must therefore be relentless. Naturally, whenever a story like this becomes public, Hollywood can't stop its temptation to capitalize. John Woo's Broken Arrow features stolen nuclear weapons and a rogue pilot. The 1996 movie, Executive Decision, references a missing bomb in the Atlantic. Video games like Fallout play on the backdrop of a post-apocalyptic world littered with nukes. Reality is both less spectacular and more disturbing. The actual incidents involve no villains plotting world domination, only tired crewmen, mechanical failures, and bureaucratic mishaps. If anything, the boring simplicity of these accidents is what makes them so terrifying to think about. There was no villain scheming some kind of master plan, there was just a pilot jettisoning a bomb to save his crew, or a technician simply dropping a wrench. In the 1950s, Oscar Morgenstern predicted that with thousands of nuclear weapons, accidents were inevitable. And he was right. Broken arrows are features of a system that prize deterrence above safety. Even the most sophisticated technologies are vulnerable to human error and mechanical failure. There's a poetic irony to the idea that some of the most powerful weapons ever created now lie quietly in mud and ice. The IB bomb rests in its silt bed, a relic of a fevered era when the US and USSR prepared for a war that never came. The Goldsboro field grows soybeans above a buried thermonuclear secondary. Spanish farmers owned land that once glittered with plutonium. Greenland's ice sheet slowly melts above fragments of American bombs. The broken arrows are reminders of the times we almost erased our own cities by accident. So if you're ever on the beaches of Tybee Island, imagine the Mark 15 resting quietly under the mud. Fishermen pass overhead, children build sand castles, and pelicans dive for fish. Somewhere down there lies 3.8 megatons of potential energy. It's a macabre treasure, and a reminder that sometimes the scariest bombs are the ones we forget about. The ones that didn't go off, but could have. And that is a rundown of America's 32 missing nuclear bombs, some of which are just there, and there's not a lot we can do about it. Isn't that comforting? As mentioned near the end, I really think the most disturbing element of this is that there was no ill will. It wasn't some grand design that overdid our grand design of safety. It was just that our design of safety isn't always so grand. There's obviously downsides to the modern information age, you know, and the fact that everyone is constantly inundated with information about everything all the time. But it's also nice because I feel like situations like this would be much harder to cover up. Now, there seems to be more accountability due to public opinion when things like this happen, and that is comforting. But it's also just not great that things like this happen, and happen with such frequency. But if our modern standards make you feel comfortable, or just the knowledge that these things happen in the first place is terrifying, either way, you're welcome. And I believe that should do it for now. And above all else, we just want to say thank you for watching. Let me know if you like content like this over on this channel, kind of just like a series of small stories that relates back to one theme. There's some other topics that on their own, like the individual story would only be like a few minutes long, but I've thought about grouping a bunch of them together for a video topic like this, so let me know if you're into that. Everyone who made this video possible, including Logan, who wrote the script and didn't die in a plane crash, I think, will be credited in the description, so be sure to show them some love. Uploads here Mondays at noon, hypothetically, except for this video, which I took a vacation on beforehand, so I was really late to getting it. My bad. Typically uploads here Mondays at noon, and then content once or twice a month over on Wendigoon, and then whenever I decide to actually play video games again, content over on Wendiglitch. And before you go, make sure to check out today's sponsor, War Thunder, and blow up some tanks. Play the game now for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile using my links in the pinned comment or video description. Those of you who haven't played War Thunder yet or are returning after a break of at least 6 months will receive a massive bonus pack on PC and consoles, including premium vehicles, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days premium account. All in all, I believe that should do it for now, but before I go, we just want to say thank you for watching. We hope that you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye! I do wonder if one of these nukes fell into my backyard and then, the government comes to take it. Could they? Because now I have a nuke and I could be standing over it with like a hammer and they're like, hey, can you give us the nuke back? And I'm like, what are you going to do? I have a nuke in a metropolitan area. So I think now I get to do the negotiating. So maybe this is my nuke now. I'll make it into like a lawn ornament or something. If you've seen any of my historical videos on any of my channels, then you may have heard me talk about private detective agencies. While some still exist, they used to be far more popular and far more controversial. Well, in the mid-19th century, the United States was a patchwork of rapidly growing cities, expanding frontiers, and budding industrial centers. The federal government was small, and most law enforcement was handled by local sheriffs, whose authority often ended at county lines. Criminals exploited these jurisdictional gaps, while counterfeiters circulated forged bills that destabilized local economies. If law enforcement agencies aren't talking to each other, then it's easy to get away with a lot. In the years before the police were a professional public institution, and before federal agencies like the FBI dominated criminal investigations, there was another force that kept the sleepless hours and watched over rail lines, banks, and presidents. That force carried a stark motto: we never sleep, and its very name inspired both reassurance and dread. This was the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, or if you've played Red Dead Redemption 2, the guys who were trying to stop the Vanderlyn gang. Alan Pinkerton, a Scottish immigrant and cooper by trade, saw an opportunity in this law. On November 10th, 2025, television actress Allison Mack debuted a new podcast called Allison After Nexium. Although you would never guess Nexium's pronounced that way if you look at it. This podcast will chronicle her journey and life after her involvement with the purported self-help organization and modern-day cult known as Nexium. The podcast received a lot of blowback for giving Mack a platform, as in April of 2019, she made headlines when she was sentenced to 3 years in prison. This was after pleading guilty to blackmailing women who were subjected to sexual humiliation within a subgroup of Nexium, orchestrated by its leader, Keith Raniere. Mack's journey to Nexium was through Hollywood. Born in West Germany to American parents Jonathan and Mindy Mack, young Allison started out modeling in print and commercial ads before studying acting in Los Angeles. Mack's early credits include the television series Seventh Heaven, the Showtime original film My Horrible Year, and Disney's Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves. However, it would be in 2001 that Mack would find her big break on the hit show Smallville, which chronicled the life of a young Clark Kent. Mack's arrest and sentencing came as a shock to many of her fans, as horrifying details about Mack's real-life persona strongly contrasted with the character she played on TV. Primarily in Smallville, the character of Chloe Sullivan, the beloved, loyal best friend of Clark Kent. But according to court records, quote, Mack recruited several women as her slaves. She approached them and advertised the group as a secret women's empowerment sorority. In order to prevent these new recruits from leaving Nexium or publicly disclosing its existence, these women provided collateral. And by collateral, I mean damaging confessions about themselves and their loved ones, sexually explicit photos and videos, and even giving up control of their financial assets. Essentially, tying themselves to the group so much that they couldn't back out. From an outsider's perspective, hearing Mack's admission would easily identify Nexium as a cult, not a personal or professional development organization as it claimed to be. We'll get into all the horrible abuse and evil tactics done to its members later in the video, but the story of Nexium is a modern-day version of a boiling frog syndrome, a respectable facade with a dark underbelly. What seems innocent on the surface gradually turns evil, and how seemingly normal, accomplished people attract to that innocent promise of success can be caught in that slow sink. As one of the more high-profile and modern examples of a cult, the media played an integral part in Nexium and Raniere's downfall, as former members spoke their truth to outlets like the New York Times, chronicling the horrors they witnessed and endured. And this article, as you can imagine, spread like wildfire, as details such as blackmail, sexual humiliation, torture, and even branding brought in every true crime junkie from every part of the world. At its center, Nexium's cult leader, Keith Raniere, was propped up as the poster child for the cult of personality. He built his image through Nexium, manufacturing his persona to create a godlike public image. And as a result, he was able to abuse more than 50 women for 2 decades. The rise and fall of Nexium is a perfect example of how cults operate, a system where manipulation and exploitation thrive in structure to enable those in power to do the unthinkable. So hello everybody, today we're going to be talking about the story of Nexium and the self-help guru who branded his students. This is a story I've been familiar with for a while. As a matter of fact, we covered it back when I was on the Red Thread, but I wanted to give it a run here with some more details and more recent developments in the case and the group survivors. It's also just important to keep stories like this in mind, how people can use goodwill to do something terrible. Before we get into the video, I just want to remind you that the Redacted collection is here and available for a limited time. You can get the WIU or FBI lookalike hat and jacket, the Manhunt shirt, and this cool journal set for a limited time at the link in the description at wendigoon.shop. Get it while you can, and if you decide to support, it means the world. So if today's topic sounds interesting, you can stick around after the ad as we talk about the horrors of Nexium. But before we talk about something terrible, let's talk about something great, like today's sponsor, AG1. That's because AG1 is your daily health drink that combines your multivitamins, probiotics, superfoods, and antioxidants into one simple green scoop. AG1 contains a lot of the things your body's missing out on. It's backed by clinical trials, but I can tell you from my own experience that it just helps me feel better. It's not like I drink it and lose weight and get more productive, but when you put the things in your body that your body's been missing out on, you'll be amazed by what you can get up to. Especially at this time of the year with a ton of deadlines and it feels like every other weekend you're traveling to see family. AG1 is an easy way to get some help. By easy, I really do mean easy, because all you need is 8 to 12 ounces of water, a spoonful of AG1, and you're good to go. And now there's even more ways to do AG1, because now in addition to their original formula, you can get AG1 in berry, citrus, or tropical flavors. From your energy to your gut health to your immune support, AG1's a good friend to have in your corner, especially during the holidays. And now's the perfect time to get in on AG1. That's because if you head to the link in the description at drinkag1.com/windagang or scan the QR code, along with your order of AG1, you'll get a free welcome kit. That's right, a free welcome kit with things like a shaker bottle of vitamin D3 and K2, some sample packs of the different flavors, and more. Again, that's link in the description at drinkag1.com/windagang or scan the QR code to get in on this incredible offer today. Thank you all for watching the ad. Thank you to AG1 for sponsoring the channel. The link will be in the description. We are now back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. The Latin root of nexium, or nexum, refers to debt, bondage, and slavery in ancient Rome, which immediately should have been a red flag to a lot of people. That is a very odd reference to make for a self-improvement group. Keith Raniere insisted that his intention for the name was in reference to the future. For him, publicly, Nexium represented, quote, the next millennium. But why was he so obsessed with what tomorrow held? Well, for that, we must look at his past. Keith Raniere was born in Brooklyn, New York on August 26, 1960. As a teenager, Raniere excelled in science and math and left high school early at the age of 16 to pursue higher education at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. But academics took a turn for the worse for Raniere in college, and he would graduate in 1982 with a 2.26 GPA, having failed numerous classes. While he did well as a child, as an adult, Raniere heavily exaggerated and outright lied about his educational feats, claiming to have spoken, quote, in full sentences when he was 1 year old, taught himself high school math in 19 hours when he was 12, and by 13 has learned 3 years of college math and several languages. This sounds like the stuff in like Kim Jong-un's autobiography, where he claimed to have like beat golf by hole-in-oneing almost every hole on a course and also inventing cheeseburgers. Like, at some point you can just lie and people won't say anything about it, I guess. As a boy, Raniere claimed to have read Isaac Asimov's sci-fi novel Second Foundation, which is about a secret organization of scientists that use telepathic abilities to guide humanity. This would undoubtedly inspire Raniere to later try and do the same. After college, Raniere worked as a computer programmer and consultant per Vanity Fair, before launching his own multi-level marketing company, Consumers Byline, in 1990. For those unfamiliar, and grateful if you are, multi-level marketing, commonly known as an MLM, is a business where distributors earn money by selling bulk products directly to consumers, who in turn recruit other individuals to do the same. These individuals give a share of their proceeds from sales to the distributor above them, and so on. Now, the difference between an MLM and a pyramid scheme boils down to the legitimacy of the business. While MLM members earn income from selling to consumers, a pyramid scheme focuses on recruiting new members and their money with little to no emphasis on sales. Effectively, you only win if you get more people in on the scheme. A few red flags to watch for in discerning if an MLM is indeed a pyramid scheme includes its emphasis on recruitment for the reasons just mentioned. Things like high upfront costs, claims to easy money, and noticeably, a pressure to join immediately. So, kind of like the military. As far as Consumers Byline's operations, the company offered discounts to its members on groceries and other products, such as dishwashers and even hotel stays. Raniere promised, quote, lucrative commissions to old customers for recruiting new ones. And Robert Bremner, a former distributor, said, quote, Raniere was like a mythological figure. The guy with 240 IQ was coming to town. By the end of 1993, Raniere said that he had, quote, sold $1 billion in goods and services, employed 80 people, and had 250,000 believers paying him $19 a month to hawk his goods. And yes, you heard that right. He referred to these people in what is publicly a business as believers. Once again, probably should have raised some concern. However, according to Bremner, Raniere appeared to, quote, carry no money, seemed to sleep all day, rolled into his office around 10 p.m., and sometimes held meetings at 1 a.m. Business sagged, debt ballooned, and customers complained. Believe it or not, this vague business that had people pay dues and then hurriedly try to get other people on board to win discounts did not end well. The con was up, and regulators in 20 states started investigating. After regulators investigated Consumers Byline for allegedly being a pyramid scheme, Raniere shut down the company and was fined $40,000, despite not admitting to any wrongdoing. Again, quote from People, according to Forbes, he only paid $9,000 of the fine, even though he claimed to be worth $50 million, which he could be lying, but either way, multimillionaire fined $9,000. I'm sure he learned his lesson. In 1994, 1 year after his settlement, Raniere and his then girlfriend, Tony Natalie, would go on to create a new MLM organization. This one was called National Health Network, another MLM that specialized in selling vitamins, which, you know, those companies are always trustworthy. This company, which he had set up in Clifton Park, New York, would be instrumental to Nexium, as it was here that he met the woman who would become his business partner, Nancy Salzman. At the time of their meeting, Salzman was a nurse and therapist who studied hypnosis and something called neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, which Raniere also studied, of course he did. The psychological approach of NLP therapist examines and mimics people's language and speech patterns to alter behavior and achieve patients' personal goals, which, once again, flag that is red should have shown up. Salzman was in awe of Raniere. She found him riveting and once wrote in a brochure, quote, "There's probably no discovery since writing as important for humankind as Mr. Raniere's technology." Okay, well, that's done. I can't think of anything that has ever been invented that I would consider with writing like as important as writing stuff down. The tech that Salzman was referring to was Raniere's self-help techniques, which, sure, as important as writing, which became the foundation for Nexium's curriculum. Salzman became Raniere's spiritual guide and his most eager follower. During this time, Salzman treated Natalie with therapy that would become the groundwork for what would become Raniere's next project. Natalie said that, quote, Salzman spent 4 days holed up with Raniere in his offices and emerged as his business partner. I'm sure nothing untoward happened in those 4 days. And those therapy sessions involved, according to CBC, quote, probing and rehashing Natalie's most painful secrets, she says, including the molestations she suffered as a child. In 1998, 8 years after founding Consumers Byline, Raniere, along with Salzman, founded Executive Success Programs, or ESP. ESP would eventually become Nexium. ESP was the set of development workshops that sold executive coaching and self-help seminars. Its early clients included billionaire Richard Branson and BET co-founder Sheila Johnson. And while Raniere started a new chapter in his professional life, he would find himself closing one in his personal life. ESP was a core component within Nexium, which was the parent organization that operated a hierarchy, that's it, that structure and ranking system for its members. I'm never beating the 3rd grade reading level accusations. Basically, ESP was the deceptive face of Nexium, used initially to engage people and draw them deeper into the cult. Tony Natalie, Raniere's girlfriend, left him in 1999, but she could not escape his terror. From Vanity Fair, quote, although Salzman would deny allegations of harassment, according to court documents, Natalie's home was broken into. Police were sent to her mother's house. Her family was threatened. Their vitamin company, National Health Network, collapsed, and Natalie, who found herself in debt, filed for bankruptcy. But, again from Vanity Fair, quote, what should have been a quick process dragged out for 9 years as Raniere filed motion after motion against Natalie. In a process, the judge would say, smacks of a jilted fellow's attempt at revenge. I love it in these cases when the judge says something that is just makes me feel good. It was during this near-decade nightmare that Natalie learned that Nexium employed a controversial private investigator named Jaral Aviv to monitor her home and look into her private life and business activities. And while Natalie was forced to live in a constant state of panic, Nexium flourished. Nexium targeted people who were concerned with developing their professional and personal skills, such as self-improvement, critical thinking, communication, and business. The ESP classes were a mix of self-help techniques, neuro-linguistic programming, and cognitive behavioral therapy tactics that were modified into a proprietary system by Raniere. In other words, someone could interact with ESP and just think it's a standard self-help thing, and not know about the inner workings of the cult until you were drawn in. Instead of going by Keith or Nancy, the two founders asked their followers, because they're calling them followers, to call them Vanguard and Prefect. What, do I have a red flag? Do I have something I can hold up and pretend it's red? I would hold up the journal cover, but that's like too prominent. I can't hold up anything that's green because it'll get lost in that. Here, I've got a skull, and that's kind of like a red flag, right? Like warning, danger, you know, death ahead, skull and crossbones. So this is the red flag now. So the people in your self-help group want to be called Vanguard and Prefect. It's one of these. NXIVM claimed to have worked with more than 16,000 people across the globe using a, quote, trademarked method called rational inquiry to help practitioners achieve their goals. The intensive multi-day workshop cost up to $7,500. And other branded labels were called the Science of Joy and Meta Theory. Once again, you can just make stuff up and people will go along with it. The ESP attendees would recite Raniere's 12-step mission statement every day, like the Pledge of Allegiance, but to a guy. So, you know, probably fine. One of the steps in that 12-step statement included that followers, quote, pledge to ethically control as much of the money, wealth, and resources of the world as possible. Also, like, it's a group of people that like appeals to celebrities and billionaires, and one of the things they commit to do is control as much money as possible. It's like a supervillain secret lair. But again, people were just going to this thing willingly. Like, they weren't being forced against their will. They're like, oh, maybe I can learn how to be better at business. And then they're saying a 12-step program about controlling the world. Maybe that's how it works. Maybe that's how people become evil. I don't know. Raniere was heavily influenced by Ayn Rand, a lot of stuff about self-interest. His mentality was summarized best by this direct quote from the mission statement his followers would recite. The world is full of people who try to destroy each other, steal from each other, down each other, or rejoice at another's demise. For Raniere, it was essential for the survival of humankind that the world's wealth and resources be controlled by the successful, ethical people, which of course refers to NXIVM trainees. We're good people. I'm a good person, so I should have everything. And you should have things you give to me. I like that idea. One of the pillars of NXIVM was facing your fears. But the leaders of NXIVM harnessed these personal fears and used them as penance for their followers' sins, so to speak. To get a sense of what an actual session within NXIVM looked like, here's an excerpt of a session between Nancy Salzman and Jacqueline, 27-year-old psychology student, as described in the New York Times. According to Jacqueline came to Salzman with a phobia. She had a fear of flying. Quote, one time she had to get off an airplane that had boarded because she became nervous, and when she wanted to get back on, the flight attendants wouldn't let her. Salzman would ask Jacqueline to think back to her childhood, as most training sessions do. Salzman asked Jacqueline a series of intimate questions related to her fear of flying, as well as questions about her parents' relationship. Based on Jacqueline's answers, Salzman, quote, ascertained that Jacqueline believed her mother was manipulated by her father, who forced the family to move often by air. Salzman suggested that Jacqueline's fear of flying, as well as her belief that her father forced her mother into a terrible life, and her inability to be an independent woman were connected. Salzman came to the conclusion that Jacqueline, like her mother, was in control and had chosen to be a victim. At the end of the session, Jacqueline had upgraded her belief system and insisted her fear of flying was gone. Her homework for the next 30 days was to do one thing that terrified her each day. And on a day when she indulged in the man's attention, Jacqueline had to do 2 terrifying things that day. Already you can see how this program uses trauma, guilt, and fear to control the behavior and thinking of its followers. But none of this would have been possible without the central tenet of every cult in human history: the man in charge. Members viewed Raniere as a great philosopher an ethical man and a scientist who was at the forefront of what humans were capable of. His classroom-based courses lasted as long as 12 hours a day. And outside of these courses, Raniere emphasized control of habits of mind and body like food and exercise. Members of NXIVM believed that Raniere could heal them, not only of emotional traumas, but also set them free from fears, attachment, and destructive thinking patterns. Some even believed he could heal them sexually too, as Raniere's ideas resonated with women, especially wealthy ones. Also, Randall, on the team who reviews these scripts, wrote underneath that line, haha, I thought it was going to say especially the horny ones. And then I look at the file and he uploaded it at 3 a.m. So, we see where he was at reading this. The thing about him preying on wealthy women makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if you take a look at today's upper class, there's an obsession with self-improvement, a demographic happily served by every corner of the health and beauty industry. People want to be skinnier, younger looking, smarter, and more empowered. They want to break barriers and transform their negative self-talk into positive. And all of these were the tools Raniere used to control women. Wellness was amongst the most unsettling. He would frequently leverage members of securities out of their way. Within NXIVM itself, the ideal member was termed potent. As written in the New York Times, quote, not only rich, but emotionally disciplined, self-controlled, attractive, and slender. According to one ex-member, quote, this is the white-collar spiritual path. It seems Raniere's goal was to target people who had issues with their self-image and a lot of concern regarding their self-image and prey upon it. It's no wonder that NXIVM benefited from its rich, high-profile clients. In fact, the group was largely funded by Claire Bronfman, an heiress to the Seagram's liquor fortune, who spent more than $100 million of her inheritance to support NXIVM. As for Allison Mack, according to the New York Times, her glowing testimonials helped bring Hollywood celebrities into the organization. Even the Dalai Lama once spoke at an NXIVM event, thanks in part to Mack's presence. How do you even book that guy? You can just get him to show up for stuff. You can be one like pseudo-religious group and get another religious leader to show up. That's the Dalai Lama. It's not like your local pastor. That's like the Pope, I think. I'm really dumb to Dalai Lama. I assume that's the equivalent. New members of NXIVM learned how to break down one's own identity, or replace it with another altogether. In NXIVM speak, it was replacing data with data. When members erased their fears, they could begin doing what they actually wanted to do with their lives, or more accurately, what Raniere and high-ranking followers wanted them to do with their lives. Like a banker who pivoted towards acting, or a school administrator who changed course and started a farm. If you were doing this thing with your life, well, that's the problem. You should do this other thing instead, placing yourself to these people in a position of control and dependence. Some of the core teachings within the various programs included deciding on one's ethics and making them a guiding life force. Members did not make decisions that were not aligned with those ethics. Over time, this guiding principle created strength and character through discipline. Other core teachings include create love. Do not reject your family, unless, of course, your family rejects NXIVM, in which some cases other steps may be required. Do not be a slave to attachments and fear. Raniere's methods of persuasion went hand in hand with his ability to disorient, presenting both sides of an argument to make his point. He encouraged positive and negative endeavors simultaneously in his teachings. For example, in NXIVM's Society of Protectors, the group's men's club, Raniere introduced a concept called collateral, or collateralizing your world, which meant adding extra leverage to your conscience. For example, let's say someone committed to running every day for exercise before meeting the group for coffee. If that person didn't uphold his word about running that day, perhaps the whole group would forego the next morning's coffee. And while this social punishment concept was certainly strange for men, like if they don't do the thing they said they were going to do, then you don't do something you said you were going to do. For women, this collateral became downright sinister. In 2015, some of NXIVM's female members began approaching other women to ask if they had felt stuck in their personal growth, often starting the conversation with, quote, I want to talk to you about something that will change your life. At this point, a top-secret, female-only subgroup had been formed within NXIVM, with claims of helping select women expedite their own journeys. And unlike the other courses, this would cost nothing. This is in spite of the fact that one of Raniere's core tenets was that, quote, true value exchange was always upheld. In other words, his courses were always paid for, and members could perform administrative tasks or nanny for richer members in order to pay off fees. So it was in Raniere's teachings to always charge for the courses. But to even approach the pitch of what NXIVM was, potential members had to give up something truly valuable. Keep in mind, most of these women were from the upper class, so something like jewelry could always get replaced. No, this collateral was instead something valuable from your personal things, something that could punish you or damage you, something that was the purest way to show trust, that if given into the wrong hands would permanently ruin your life. The most common types of collateral were a picture or a video or as a crime, sometimes even a house. But what NXIVM leadership called collateral, you and I would probably call by its more proper term, blackmail. This secret group was given names matched to extreme levels of dedication and required from those who belonged to it. It's called the vow. Other women refer to this group as Dominus Obsequious Sorority, which is broken Latin for Lord over the obedient female companions, or just DOS. According to Ranieri, this group was a sorority. DOS was created in 2015, and its dedicated members say that they joined the group themselves when some members pledged ultimate commitment in helping another member who was still in the time. The group then moved to a, quote, military-style group that was trying to address the place of women in the world to make them realize that they were not victims. And near the top of DOS, one of its high-ranking members was Allison Mack. She had come to NXIVM, unhappy with where her acting career was at, and even asked Ranieri to make her a great actress. Allison Mack said of DOS and its twisted recruitment process, quote, the woman who invited and recruited you to DOS was your master, representation of your conscience, your higher self, the most ideal. Which, again, I understand frog boil and stuff like that, but at what point do you show up to get better at acting and now you're so like your master and getting naked pictures of yourself in your house? At what point are you like, I don't think these are acting classes at all? What these masters symbolized for DOS recruits was someone they aspired to be, which aligns with the whole self-improvement movement was founded. Reason first place. One of them, Michelle, remembers when she was recruited by someone from far. Quote, I knew she was involved. There was probably other badass women involved, and I want to be a badass woman. I'm struggling to do that. As for the women who were initiated by these masters, well, they referred to themselves as slaves, because of course they didn't going on to this point. And also, like with every other cult in the world, it's become a in DOS, masters help slaves count calories per day. Oftentimes, these masters would administer acts of knives, taking freezing cold showers, waking up at 4 in the morning. Still, there was also the fact that believed to be instrumental in creating sexual patterns. These slaves were able to care for masters at first by performing tasks like bringing in coffee or running errands. According to Mac, the relationship was about devotion, like any spiritual practice of religion. Notice it's not like any spiritual practice of religion at all. I've been around a lot of religious people, and none of them done that. Mac was a powerful and she also gained recognition with celebrities as smart one notable that failed was here's her tweet from January 2016. Ask the Lord, I'm a fellow actress like yourself, involved in an amazing women's movement. I think you did. I'd love to get if you're open. So fun. Important here, because what DOS actually did in the name of a ritual of sisterhood was to undermine the concept of self-empowerment and self-ownership, especially of their own bodies. It's also one of NXIVM's core principles, quote, pain creates conscience. Do not be afraid of pain. DOS members were invited to homes around Clifton Park near Albany. They were under the guise of receiving a small tattoo as an initiation. Once they arrived, they were told to strip naked and lie on a massage table one by one, while a female osteopath, who was also a NXIVM member, quote, used a cauterizing pin to brand their flesh near the pelvic bone. The osteopath then carved a symbol that some women thought represented a variety of marks, the 4 elements, or the 7 chakras, or a horizontal bar with the Greek letters alpha and mu. However, if you squinted and looked again, the symbol contained a K and an R, Ranieri's initials. Unfortunately, not all women were told that these initials were present in the symbol. As part of the ritual, DOS members kneeled and were asked to say, quote, "Master, please brand me. It would be an honor I want to wear the rest of my life." Although Ranieri was not physically present in the room while the branding happened, it's important to note that he was the orchestrator of the ritual, responsible for even how the women were positioned, according to him, like a sacrifice, with the women's legs and hands held down. See, I told you, it always comes back to weird sex stuff with these people. Despite denying knowing anything about the branding, an email from the Times showed that, quote, Ranieri wrote a female follower that the design of the symbol used to brand women incorporated his initials as a tribute to him. Like most rites of passage, the experience was intensely frightening. I mean, you're getting branded. Some women wore surgical masks to keep them from breathing in the smell of burning flesh. They leaned on each other as a coping mechanism, telling each other that the brand will look like an ancient hieroglyph, and cried out together, quote, "Badass warrior bitches, let's get strong together." What are we doing? I mean, you're getting branded by people you just met, and you're like, this is fine. This is cool even. But lest we forget, Ranieri's background was in MLMs, and his experience with these schemes was evident in NXIVM as a whole, and DOS especially. Each master was recruited to recruit slaves. For slaves to eventually become masters, they would have to recruit 6 other slaves of their own to form a pod. Each of those slaves was then encouraged to recruit their own 6, which emphasized the MLM-like structure within DOS. At its peak, 150 individuals had joined DOS, which according to Mac was like a little family. 2018, when Mac was asked in a New York Times Magazine interview about the cauterized brand, she took full responsibility for the idea. She wanted something more meaningful than a tattoo. But during her time in DOS, Mac was firmly placed in Ranieri's inner circle as his personal slave, according to the FBI. Her collateral to Ranieri, her master, was horrifying. Quote, a contract declaring that if she broke her commitment, her home would be transferred into his name and future children born by her would be his. So if I ever leave this group, you can have my home and any children I create. That's, value for value, I guess. Additional collateral included a letter of social services that claimed the abuse of her nephews. The specificity of this letter could lead one to believe that Ranieri had it written or coerced Mac into writing it, and should her loyalty waver, it would be dispatched to social services. And of course, her collection of nude photos that she sent to Ranieri. Upon receiving these photos, Ranieri sent Mac a text. All mine, ? With a smiling devil emoji. He doesn't even talk like a cult leader. He talks like a 15-year-old boy. All mine, he he he. So not only do you have naked pictures of me, and you can have my kids, and you can have my house, but if I ever leave, here's a letter telling the police that I abused my nephews. There's no acting advice he could have gave that would have justified that. Ranieri's views on gender and sex, particularly women, boil down to this. Women and men are wired differently, and therefore must be treated vastly differently from one another in terms of controlling them. According to Ranieri, quote, men are naturally promiscuous and women are naturally monogamous. Men are repressed, but they have an understanding of right and wrong. Women can be disloyal and get away with whatever they want. You can see where this is building up to. Well, men should naturally be able to sleep with whoever they want, and women should only sleep with one man. And women are actually bad, but men are good, they're repressed, and they keep it in. This is gonna lead with him, with all of them, yeah. I always wonder with stories like this, if there's one person who like gets out here. Like, if someone got the brand, they were a part of it, they were down for everything, but then once the harem starts getting created, they're like, maybe I go. Maybe this is when I leave. This belief was very much reflected in Ranieri's personal behavior. Despite the larger Nexium community being told that he was celibate, the inner circle knew he actually had multiple relationships, up to a dozen women within Nexium who were told they could only have sex with him. He demanded that some of them starve themselves to attain his preferred physique. And according to testimony, he, quote, sometimes grunted like a pig when women wanted to eat. Once again, not only is he a coercive serial rapist, but he's being annoying while he's doing it. Now, obviously, when you hear these stories, you wonder how anyone could possibly stay in this group, in this relationship, in this cult. But time and time again, we've seen how the power of belief, the magnetic personality of the charismatic leader, and the slow, steady descent from normal and sane into the shocking and depraved creates a recipe for success for brainwashing people into staying. And also the fact that everyone involved has some really damning blackmail over their heads. So even if they start to get cold feet and think they should leave, they can. This guy owns their homes or naked photographs of them, which is especially damning to someone in the entertainment industry. Or in Mac's case, a letter from her saying she abuses her nephews. Were members in this culpable for actions they did? Sure. But the true evil lies with the figure orchestrating this whole thing. Now, at this point in the public eye, Nexium had the hallmarks of a legit, successful self-help company thanks to the ESP workshops. Guys like Richard Branson, whose Private Island resort hosted the ESP workshops. Private Island for billionaires with sex cults. Doesn't ring a bell. And the Dalai Lama, who spoke at a Nexium event, gave credibility to Ranieri and Nexium, even to the point where Lululemon, the athleisure company, wanted to potentially use Nexium's curriculum. But Ranieri backed out of what would have been a lucrative deal because he recognized Lululemon would sniff out what he was trying to hide. Couldn't have anyone getting too close. And of course, even on the surface business, Keith Ranieri was a fraud. Nobody had ever seen him write an ESP module. He claimed to be a classically trained pianist, but no one had ever seen him play the piano. He claimed to be a judo champion, but had any of his followers witnessed his supposed talent? When he mentioned earlier, I highly doubt he taught himself math when he was a preteen. In regard to ESP, he was reluctant to upgrade the company's website or remake its image. For Ranieri, the company's success was all word of mouth. They didn't need a website. So it made sense that when Nexium members learned about the branding, many of them did leave. But much of the inner circle stayed. Because while the outside members may have heard about the branding and got freaked out, people on the inside who have the brand had so much blackmail with Ranieri that they can't leave. Sarah Edmondson, former member who was the head of Nexium's Vancouver office, played a key part in exposing Ranieri and Nexium's dark secret society. Again, Nexium had a huge front-facing public image with a lot of people involved who didn't know about the disturbing underbelly. And Sarah Edmondson was one of the people involved in that underbelly who ended up being a whistleblower. In May of 2017, she had begun to distance herself from DOS. When Anthony Ames, her husband and fellow Nexium member, learned about her branding, he was furious, and the couple wanted out. Ames drove to Nexium's Albany office, demanding to recoup the money he was owed for initiation costs and expenses. As he confronted another member about his wife's brand, Ames kept his cell phone in his pocket and turned on its recorder. But this member he was speaking to wasn't just any other member, he was Lauren Salzman, daughter of Nexium co-founder Nancy Salzman. On the phone recording, Ames angrily revealed that he knew about the collateral that had been collected from DOS. As Salzman tried to calm him down, it's clear that there was nothing she could have said at that moment to satiate his anger. And this would be the first domino to fall. By 2017, multiple former members had asked New York state authorities to investigate Nexium and its subgroup, DOS. Specifically, Sarah Edmondson filed a complaint with the New York State Department of Health against Danielle Roberts, a licensed osteopath and follower of Ranieri. You'll remember is the woman who performed the brandings. But the Department of Health refused to pursue the complaint because their actions had been consensual. You can't arrest someone for branding someone else if the other person knew they were being branded. So Edmondson had only one option left. Along with several other whistleblowers, she went to the press to tell her story, and thus began the monster Nexium received as a sex slave cult, and not a self-improvement company. And, you know, the fact that Ranieri turned out to have a cast of women who he forced to have sex with him didn't help his case. The first story on Nexium's dark underbelly in a major publication was an article in the New York Times reporting on the branding of its members. In this article, Edmondson detailed her experience of being branded, how she was recruited to DOS by Nancy Salzman, how the women were required to text their masters every day, and how to respond to their master's text within 60 seconds or face punishments such as paying penalties, fasting, or physical punishment. The article chronicled how members started questioning Raniere and his methods and the eventual exodus of his followers. A recurring theme throughout the article was that members asked authorities to intervene, but officials declined to pursue action, which once again, sadly kind of standard in these stories. As the article's main subjects, Edmondson and the other former members provided a majority of the testimony in the story. As Nexium started to unravel, panic spread within DOS. Slaves were ordered to delete encrypted messages between them and erase documents. As for Raniere, he did the smartest thing he could have done and fled the United States, moving into a villa near Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Raniere summoned his first-line masters, the initial 8 members of DOS, to Mexico at, quote, a gated community near Puerto Vallarta for a, quote, recommitment ceremony that former DOS member Lauren Salzman believed to include group sex. I mean, it's not funny because this guy's evil and bad things happen to people. I understand that. But it is funny to imagine he's so stupid because he has no gambit. Like, he lies about everything he does. He doesn't actually have any skills. So when the FBI starts investigating him and people are going to go to jail and it's a big deal, he goes to Mexico and he's like, all right, everyone, I have an idea, and it's just an orgy. Again, that's all he can come up with. Some of the women who accompanied Raniere to Mexico include Allison Mack and Nikki Klein, as well as Salzman herself. Raniere would lie low here for the next 5 months, stopping usage of his phone and switching email accounts until his eventual capture, which was prompted by an Instagram post shared by Klein that had mistakenly revealed their location. It's so perfect. He got by an Instagram post. How is he this stupid? I mean, look at this picture. It's not even a good post. And it's also so clearly incriminating the location. They're all stupid. In March of 2018, Mexican police descended on Raniere's villa with a warrant for his arrest and an extradition order. He was charged in the United States with racketeering conspiracy, wire fraud conspiracy, forced labor conspiracy, sex trafficking conspiracy, and attempted sex trafficking. Again, not like sex trafficking isn't funny to clarify, but it is funny to get charged with sex trafficking and attempted sex trafficking because then it just sounds like sometimes you were bad at it. Lauren Salzman was in the bedroom with Raniere at the time of the police raid, and when they barged in, he ran to hide in the closet. From the closet, Raniere ordered Salzman to negotiate with the authorities to open his door, telling her that they could not enter if she didn't allow them to. This is not true or how warrants work, and proved to be false when they kicked down the door, located Raniere, and dragged him away. It's also funny to think on top of everything else he was a sovereign citizen. Wouldn't surprise me. When Salzman was on the witness stand more than a year later during his trial, she recalled her confusion at Raniere's behavior. His hiding in the closet completely contradicted what he had taught in Nexium about the roles of men and women. In many of Nexium's courses, quote, men were presented as resolute protectors, while women were described as self-absorbed and narcissistic. Which, okay, for one, you're telling me that the leader of this sex cult organization, who told everyone he was celibate while owning several sex slaves who referred to themselves as slaves and others as masters, who he forced to remain loyal to him, you're telling me this guy didn't practice what he preached? Wow. This is news to me. And also, I thought the whole reel that brought these people in initially, at least a lot of the women, was like about female empowerment and independence. So they go from that to being like, yeah, well, I was told that I'm bad for being a woman and men are protectors. What? How did he negotiate from one to the other? How long did that take? Those are like the opposite beliefs. You're fine with that now? In July of 2018, the case against Raniere expanded. A superseding indictment charged Raniere, Claire Bronfman, Allison Mack, Nexium's former bookkeeper Kathy Russell, Lauren Salzman, and Nancy Salzman with racketeering conspiracy that included a bevy of crimes, such as identity theft, extortion, forced labor, sex trafficking, money laundering, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. And nearly a year later, a string of guilty pleas from Ranieri's inner circle all but sealed his fate. Because they might have been loyal to him for a while, but now that everyone's on trial, that guy didn't. The woman who previously wanted to be referred to as Prefect was charged with identity theft, along with the illegal tampering of records as a means of influencing the lawsuit against Nexium. Prosecutors had found evidence, which Nancy admitted to, that she had altered voice recordings and removed damaged portions in order to avoid turning them over to the prosecution in that lawsuit. Later that month, her daughter, Lauren Salzman, pleaded guilty to racketeering and racketeering conspiracy. Nancy was sentenced to 42 months in prison, while Lauren was sentenced to 5 years of probation and 300 hours of community service. This was Lauren's testimony that helped convict Ranieri, and therefore she got a lighter sentence. On April 8th of 2019, Allison Mack pleaded guilty to the same charges as Lauren Salzman. Again, the daughter got a life sentence. This was after prosecutors dropped all of Mack's charges related to sex trafficking and forced labor. In court, according to the New York Times, quote, Mack saw that she admitted that she had lured women into jobs by saying they would be part of a female mentoring program. Officials said that Mack had instead recruited them into the society as slaves, where some women were required to have sex with Ranieri. But again, because of the confession and naming Ranieri, she was only sentenced to 3 years. On April 19th, 2019, Claire Bronfman pleaded guilty to 2 charges related to identity theft and immigration fraud. Kathy Russell also pleaded guilty to visa fraud and Bronfman was sentenced to 21 months in prison. So that just leaves us with Ranieri himself. The 6-week trial began on May 7th, 2019. Prosecutors presented a strong case, as you can imagine, against the Nexium leader, as former members testified that, as the program's courses progressed, Ranieri, quote, used psychological manipulation to indoctrinate his followers into obedience. Critics of the program faced retaliation and lawsuits, creating an internal culture with no tolerance or dissent. However, the majority of the trial focused on DOS, the program which prosecutors said Ranieri founded to provide himself a, quote, flow of submissive women, which, yeah, that's pretty accurate. After some intensely explicit and gruesome testimonies were given against Ranieri, he was finally convicted on June 19th, 2019. Jurors deliberated less than half a day before they found Ranieri guilty of all 7 counts: conspiracy, racketeering, sex trafficking, identity theft, forced labor, sexual exploitation of a child, and possession of child pornography. The last charge being, since some of the collateral images he was given by new members were of women who were not 18. You see how terrible they are, and somehow they find ways to be worse. Ranieri was sentenced to life in prison, thankfully. More than a dozen victims, providing hours of statements, contributed to his fall. Ranieri responded by accusing the trial's judge of corruption, demanding a new trial, and the judge would deny this request. Ranieri's reign of terror had finally come to an end, but the media's reign of terror was just beginning. In the HBO documentary series, The Vow, there's a scene where a new recruit meets Ranieri for the first time. The lead up to the meeting is intimidating. Ranieri's followers had described their leader to this new recruit as godlike, with a world record IQ. He was, according to them, judo master and a piano virtuoso. There was nothing he could have done. But when Ranieri finally reveals himself at a small gathering, the result is almost laughingly overwhelming. Instead of a god, what stands before the recruit is a small man with, like a better word, really deleted vibe. It's an intentionally comical moment, played for laughs, as voiceover asks, "This is the dude?" But this is probably the best possible visual testament to the contradictory nature of the person's personality. The way these men are described by their followers, pale, defended, exalted, is rooted in the way these followers are made to feel about them, not a reflection of who they really are. Anyone outside the circle of influence can see that to this day. Those inside the circle don't see a man, they see a being. Ranieri's almost placid appearance, contrasted with the weight of his influence and the severity of his crimes, is a phenomenon highlighted by the documentary and the internet's memification. But in addition to his ability to influence, he had another weapon at his disposal: a female-focused training by which he could cleverly disguise his motives. As Vanity Fair wrote, quote, Justice Manson capitalized on the imperfections of free love. Ranieri enticed women smorgasbord, wellness, activism, feminism to its highest, purest level. With Nexium, Ranieri used himself as a company during a time when TED Talks were all the rage, with TED serving about the facts of life. He used this mentality to coerce members Bison as its primary subjects, both former members who worked their way up Nexium's little hierarchy, followed the right path, and who helped recruit more members and expand the organization across North America. They were also now speaking out of the time series in 2017. Edmondson hopes that the documentary helps keep people from making the same mistakes she did. Quote from the LA Times, "When people look at things like this, their instinct is to say, that would never happen. Only stupid people fall for stuff like this." The documentary helped dispel the myth of how people get involved. After all, nobody joins a cult on purpose, just like nobody gets into an abusive relationship on purpose, which is how these things always work. Once you're in the pod, it's hard to tell that it's heating up. An important part of the healing process for Edmondson was getting her brand of Rhaenyra's initials removed from her body. What's left on her is an orange white line, a reminder of her strength and what she's gone through. A symbol that she says means she's a survivor. For Vincent, his experience with Nexium, quote, broke his holiness and goodness. When he left the group, his attitude towards personal growth was reactionary. He despised anything that had to do with human potential, unable to disassociate it from a stand led by psychopaths. Understandable, given all that he had done. As shown in the documentary, Nexium was a cult built for the internet era. Members constantly filmed their activities and recorded conversations with each other in the area. When he questioned more on it, he got out by his friends. Following the group's downfall, Nexium has been re-examined in the same visual means. Jokes about Nexium's acapella group, which yes, was real known and called it simply to spread apart, and other tidbits about the group find internet online. The fact that Nexium, headquartered in suburban Albuquerque, was once described by the realm of the modern world, and Nexium did not follow all practices of military dress and certified by the same outfit. This is the guy that had a hair of women. All contributed to people making fun of it a lot as they should. While we don't know if Rhaenyra is petitioning for a volleyball court, we do know that Karen and Sulfur are reliable and very Rhaenyra was assaulted by a fellow injured, Maurice Clippers, with a closed fist on Rhaenyra's head and face. The former cult leader suffered, quote, black eyes, swelling, nausea, and dizziness for more than a week. His request for ice packs to treat the swelling and pain were allegedly denied, which, that's great. That's awesome. But isn't that like a human rights violation to have an inmate not held up? You know what else is a human rights violation? Rape. And we did that a lot more than not being a nice pack process altogether. But how did Rhaenyra's lack of magnetism enable him to make women fall for his spell? How did he amass so much power amidst his awkwardness and cringe-worthy conversations? These questions open up much larger conversation on cults in general. Because if history is doomed to repeat itself, it's only a matter of time before it's near. And this one might be true. According to cult experts, characteristics of the cult involve any kind of pressure and quick decisions to involve in the organization. This is the case of Nexium, as its force application process pressured recruits to take advantage of a flow of unique opportunities that might not come back around. One of the main reasons authorities have tremendous difficulty in prosecuting cult leaders is that members often say they're acting out of their own free will. And in many countries outside the U.S., it's difficult to bring cases of psychological manipulation to court simply due to an absence of laws on the subject. For example, some countries don't even have an agreed-upon legal definition of a cult. In a May 2023 TED Talk called How to Spot a Cult, ex-Nexium whistleblower Sarah Edmondson spoke about the red flags intended to help listeners distinguish a cult from a safe community. One of the main tactics she highlighted was love bombing, in which a special person or group of people use an excess of compliments to lull you into a false sense of security. Only after you've been manipulated do they reveal their true agenda. And of course, after they behave purely, they love bomb again and the cycle continues. Former members speaking out against Rhaenyra and Nexium, like Edmondson, as well as those depicted in The Vow, have been crucial in educating the public about the way these manipulative tactics are used in cults. Like I mentioned earlier, Allison Mack's podcast debuted on November 10th of this year. And it's a surprising move as she has largely stayed out of the public eye since her release after serving 2 years of her 3-year sentence. The podcast offers a critical look at how a group like Nexium was allowed to flourish. But we already know the answer. It marketed itself as a self-improvement group to a vulnerable group of men and women who were desperate to make themselves better. NXIVM taught members that if they shared the most fragile parts of themselves with an audience, everyone could make sure they wouldn't fall back on their negative ways of thinking and acting, according to Business Insider. Raniere weaponized the allure of personal growth and masked the brutality of his methods under the rigors of self-improvement to hide his abuse. And he employed the presence of celebrities like Mac to legitimize the organization and attract other members. For writer Sarah Berman, if Raniere does leave a world-changing legacy, then it, quote, might be the way feds prosecute future sex trafficking cases. The use of racketeering legislation in such cases was rare when the Eastern District of New York first indicted Raniere in 2018, but it's since been used in high-profile cases against offenders like Jeffrey Epstein and R. Kelly. So hey, if Raniere didn't do it, maybe those cases wouldn't have gone as great as they have. They've gone great, right? I haven't checked the news, right guys? Right? In conclusion, NXIVM's downfall and public portrayal helped reshape how we discuss cults, the self-help industry, and psychological abuse in a time when society seems to be increasingly aware of psychological terminology. By building a belief system around the false promise of personal achievement, an oddly charismatic narcissist was, ironically, able to convince dozens of high-achieving individuals to work against their own best self-interests, surrounding them with people they trust and coaxing many of them to hand over compromising information on themselves. He was able to keep them there. So the next time you find yourself questioning if you're about to join a cult, whether it's an especially enthusiastic group fitness class or a book club that your one friend who's way too into astrology just invited you to, look around. See if they welcome questions. See if you're able to leave without resistance or drama, and like most things in life, see if it involves a healthy balance of commitment. If not, then you, my friends, may have just found yourself ankle deep in the next example of a modern cult. Or, hypothetically, it could also be some dorks who like exchanging books. I don't know. But to be safe, you should probably assume they're a cult. And that should do it for the rise and fall of the NXIVM cult. And above all else, I just want to say, thank you for watching. Again, this is an interesting case that seems to be talked about more and more, and for good reason. So hopefully you enjoyed. Thank you to everyone for watching, and be sure to thank all the team members in the description who made this video possible. Again, get the redacted collection while you can at the link in the description at wendigoon.shop. New content on the way. That should do it for now. Before I go, we just want to say thank you for watching. We hope that you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye. Also, I know the reference I used at the beginning of the video, the whole frog and boiling water metaphor, I know that's not actually how it works. That came from an experiment where they lobotomized frogs, and then lo and behold, they don't jump out of boiling water. Who could have guessed? And also, I probably missed a couple, so just to be safe. Bye. In the spirit of October and for a lead up to Halloween, we're kicking off a series of creepy, unsettling, and horrifying new topics each week. And to kick it off, we're talking about America's first serial killer, H.H. Holmes. The man who built a 3-story structure during the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, which contained numerous secret rooms, hidden passages, and trapdoors. We're going to talk about how he built his murder castle and, by some estimates, got away with the murder of hundreds. We're going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. In 1894, Marion Hedgepeth, aka the Handsome Bandit, aka the Debonair Bandit, was serving his 25-year sentence in the St. Louis Penitentiary for his part in his gang's train robbery. 1 year in, he was paired with a new cellmate named Henry M. Howard. Howard was doing time for a botched attempt to swindle a pharmacy, and he quickly made it known to his ridiculously good-looking cellmate that his brief stint in this correctional facility would not be correcting his conman ways. After the two men got to talking, Howard offered Hedgepeth $500 to help him find a lawyer that would go along with his next scheme. The scheme was using a body from the morgue to fake his business partner's death for a $10,000 life insurance payout. How Hedgepeth would receive that money or what
inside my head. Impulse, ignition, ammunition, aim right at my chest. Disposition fought the prison